Welcome to DBC. Today we are discussing the article by Abraham Maslow, which is entitled A Theory of Human Motivation. And this is a famous article from which Maslow's famous hierarchy of needs was originally written about, and it's expanded upon later. And we're going to hop into this. So a couple of things. It's really short. It was originally published in the journal called Psychological Review in July of 1943. We're going to talk about three sort of things. There's an introduction. There's the five basic needs, a hierarchy of needs that Maslow expounds in this article. And then we're going to talk a little bit about the needs in general and the model. And then we'll wrap it up. So as an introduction, there's the term that I don't really see repeated often that comes up throughout this article. And that is the idea of Maslow's word is prepotency. And prepotency is the idea that there's an appearance of one need that usually rests on a prior satisfaction of another and more prepotent need. So every desire or need is related to the state of satisfaction or dissatisfaction of other drives. And the idea here is that also, so prepotency, we'll return to that as we discuss the five needs in relation to each other. And the idea here is that motivation in humans is goal related, not drive related, which may be more of a Freudian take. But the idea is, what is the goal of human motivation? It's kind of the background of the model here. So he says, Maslow says that motivations theory is not synonymous with behavior theory because motivations are only one type or determinant of behavior. So behavior is almost always motivated, not always, and we'll talk about that in a minute. It's almost always biologically, culturally, and situationally determined, as well as the motivation side of it. So he says at the end of the introduction that this article is, the present theory must be considered as a suggested framework for which future research can be done. So he's not posing this as, oh, this is the end all of a theory of human motivation. So let's hop into the basic needs. I'm sure you're all familiar with this triangle that you see everywhere, right? So the most prepotent of all the needs are physiological needs. And he said this is not always a homeostasis issue. And that physiological needs are a sort of a behavior, a channel through which other needs may run. So the person might think that they're hungry, but be seeking comfort or dependence, comfort more than dependence on vitamins or protein. So he says that a person lacking in food, safety, love, and esteem would probably hunger for food more strongly than anything else. This is sort of the biggest line from the physiology section. So again, I'll read that again. It says the person who's lacking in food, safety, love, and esteem would probably hunger for food more strongly than anything else. So consider the metaphor he uses there, hunger for food. And think about how we think of hunger and striving for other things that aren't just food, or the thirst for knowledge, right? So there's this implied in that metaphor is the fundamental nature of the physiological, the most prepotent of all the needs he talks about. And he has so Maslow was born and died and did all his research in the United States. And he talks about the average American citizen. This is back in the 40s, still true, I would argue to this day, that when a U.S. citizen is experiencing appetite, he says appetite more than hunger. When the person says, I am hungry, they're really experiencing appetite, not like a physiological life or death hunger. So back to prepotency, there's the idea that there's a need, for example, hunger or thirst or any other physiological need, and that it can become gratified. Let's say you eat a meal, and then satiation happens, and then a new need, like a need number 2, which we're going to talk to, will be safety, for example, comes up and it's gratified. And that allows for the emergence of need number 3. So moving on, once physiological needs are met, we go to safety needs. And in this section, he draws almost entirely, not from adults or normal adults, but from infants and neurotic adults. So he says that we as adults have been taught to inhibit the safety needs, to sort of hide on the face level if we feel unsafe. That this should not be something on the surface. But he says not so much in infants. So he says that a child in our society generally prefers like a safe, orderly, predictable, and organized world where they can count on dangerous, random, violent things not happening. And that he also has all-powerful parents who protect and shield him from harm. And this idea of parents working with the safety needs in infants is something that comes up in Maslow's later work with more social implications in individuals here. So big fan of Western civilization. Talks about how often do we have run-ins with wild animals, temperature extremes, criminals, assault, murder, tyranny. It's an exception in Western cultures, he says. So in adults, the safety need is really interesting. We're moved sort of from physical safety to a psychological safety. Is the preference of having a familiar sort of a worldview, which is provided by philosophy and or religion, to organize the universe and the people in it in a meaningful way. So really cool, sort of the two levels of safety there. Moving on to the love needs, which he says are love, affection, and belonging. So if the first two levels of needs are met, physiology and safety, I want to read his quote here because it's great how he says it sort of walks you through the process, right? So if the first two levels are met, now a person will feel keenly as never before the absence of friends or of a sweetheart or a wife or children. And he may even forget that once, when he was hungry in the true sense of the word, he sneered at love. So this is the idea of prepotency, that the idea of he didn't even notice the absence of friends or love. And if he did, he discounted it as something superfluous, right? And at that point it was. So one other point here is that he talks about love, sexual behavior. He says that it's often multi-determined, that it's not just to say like a sexual thing, that there's also other needs, chief among which are love and affection. And also not to be overlooked is the fact that the idea of the love needs goes both from giving and receiving on both ends. So once love needs have been sufficiently realized, we move to the fourth level of the pyramid, which is esteem. And esteem here has an A and a B category for Maslow. So the A category is the idea of the desire for strength, achievement, adequacy, confidence, independence, and freedom. So these are internal things. And then there's also the B side is the desire for reputation, prestige, recognition, attention, importance, and appreciation. So on esteem, there's external and internal esteem. And much has been said about which of those is worth pursuing, which he doesn't really touch on here at all. He just kind of leaves it there. So gratification at this level results in things like self-confidence, self-worth, strength, feeling useful or even necessary in the world. And then thwarting or these needs being withheld, not met, result in feelings of inferiority, weakness, and helplessness. So once esteem needs are met, the final level of his pyramid at this level of his work is self-actualization. And self-actualization he defines as the desire for self-fulfillment, the desire to become more and more what one is, to become everything that one is capable of being. And this reminds, if anyone's read Nietzsche, his last book, Ecce Homo, sort of the tagline of the book is like becoming what one is. Right? And he says that most people, back to Maslow, says that most people don't reach this point in their lives. And he's very upfront about this. And so that's kind of the meat and potatoes of the 5 levels of needs that you're all familiar with, I'm sure. So, and the last section of the book we'll talk about real quick is sort of expounding upon the relationship of the needs and kind of getting into the dynamics of them. So he talks about there's preconditions for these needs being satisfied. And this sort of hints at a political stance, which he will bring up later in his career, but not in the scope of his essay. So there's a freedom to express oneself, a freedom to investigate, seek out, and find information, to defend oneself, a need of justice, fairness, and honesty in society. So there's a point to the social, not just the individual, with the needs even being possibly to be met. So more characteristics. He asked the questions about these needs. How fixed is this hierarchy that we see everywhere? Like, are those lines really solid lines? Is this triangle really a triangle? So Maslow says, it's not really that rigid. So some people have said that self-esteem, actually, esteem comes before love here. And he has a really great retort to that, which he says that most people seek highest self-esteem as a means to obtain love. And I wrote boom in the notes because that's a pretty good insight. Some of the lower needs, particularly love and safety, may be gone totally from people who he refers to as psychopathic personalities. And then there's this idea that people who have been made to feel strong and secure in the earliest of their years, so in their infancy, they tend to remain secure and strong thereafter in the face of whatever threats might come to their needs. And this, again, points to his thoughts on parenting that come up later in his career. The idea also that in adults, in reality, like so people that he's actually studied, there's like a decreasing percentage of satisfaction as we move up the pyramid. So like someone may be like 90%, 95, 100% physiologically good, and then maybe 75, 50, 40%, and then only like maybe 20% self-actualized. He admits again that it's very rare that someone's fully self-actualized person. A couple other things. He said it's even possible to have all 5 of these needs acting in the same act. One really good quote. One may make love not only for sexual release, but also to convince oneself of one's own masculinity, or to make a conquest, or these ideas of esteem coming up, or to feel powerful, to win more basic affection. So this idea here is that in the same action, these lines might be more dashed lines, or may not even be there at all, that they're sort of fluid and they can move, they can work together. Not all behavior, again, this is about human motivation, not all behavior in humans is motivated. He talks about memory recalls being a situation of that. Like he says, if I say the word table, like you just had the image of a table recalled, there wasn't really any motivation there. So in quick summary at the very end, I've noticed he uses the words dominate and monopolize consciousness when he speaks about the need. So there's this image of man as a perpetually wanting and striving animal. And that's the end of the quick essay. So this is it's a short work, but it's not dense by academic standards. Compared to, I would say, like a popular science book that's coming out these days, it's going to be a little more dense than that, but a far cry from what some academic papers can be. Very, very accessible. And 11 years later, in 1954, Maslow actually wrote a book that's, depending on the edition, you get 350 to 400 pages, called Motivation and Personality, where he expands on over a decade of thinking and working with these ideas, and works into the more political and family system-oriented ideas. So thanks for watching this one, and we'll see you next time.